Officially. I'm Meg Carney, the founding director of the Solstice Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program here at LaSalle University in Auburndale, Massachusetts. This is the first in a series of 7 readings taking place as part of our January 2025 10-day residency, start of our spring semester. So let's begin tonight's reading. First up, we will have fiction faculty member Venise Berry, who will be introduced by fiction student Amjad McDonald. Then we will have poetry faculty member Iain Haley Pollock, introduced by fellow faculty member Laura Williams McCaffrey. We will conclude with fiction, nonfiction, and comics and graphic narratives faculty member Jennifer Murvin, who will be introduced by fiction student Beth Zimmer. And before Jen reads, she's going to be showing her screen and sharing her images. So we'll just have like a very quick setup to do before Jen reads last. So Amjad, come on up.
Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna put my old lady glasses on. And I have a cough, so if I start coughing, I do apologize. It is my great pleasure to be standing here. And I would just like to say, good evening. My name is Amjad McDonald, and I'm a 3rd semester fiction student here at Solstice. And it is my honor to introduce Professor Venise Berry. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her before she comes up here on the stage. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that how does Venise Berry find time to do all the things that she does? Inconceivably, as a longtime professor of the Solstice Low Residency program here at LaSalle, and a productive author who continues to produce work and be published, she finds time to offer guidance, mentorship, and friendship to those seeking to learn from her experience and knowledge. I was fortunate enough to have Venise as my workshop mentor during my first semester here, and I cannot tell you how refreshing her direct, matter-of-fact feedback was. Like, truly refreshing. I cannot even begin to tell you, because we've all been to those workshops where everyone tells you you're awesome. And that does nothing for you. She helped me see things I was too close to, and she helped me become a better writer for it. I learned through interviews that I've seen online and experiences that I've gathered while preparing for this. I learned that Professor Berry approaches her writing in a manner that mimics her background as a journalist, even when it comes to fiction. She begins with the topic, researches that topic, and lets the story and characters emerge from the research. This approach has served her well, as Professor Berry has been published both critically and commercially. She authored So Good, an African-American love story, which explores relationships. All of Me, a voluptuous tale that examines issues of weight and wellness in society, and her novel Colored Sugar Water, which tackled the topic of spirituality. In addition to her award-winning national best-selling novels, Professor Berry has penned a memoir as well as several critically acclaimed nonfiction works in a role as an associate professor of journalism and mass communication and African American studies at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. Professor Berry is well known for her research and exploration of issues facing African American women today, and her writing and publication reflects her passion. Please help me welcome to the stage Professor Venise Berry.
All right. I get to go first. That's always exciting. A lot of people don't like to go first, but I like to go first because I get to set the standard. The piece that I've selected to read comes from an anthology that I've been talking about that a lot of you have heard about for the last couple of years. It's called The Black Superwoman and Mental Health, Power, and Pain. And we do have a publisher. It will be out at the end of this spring. It's with, thank you. I'm a co-editor of the book, and it is an anthology. I have 30 different authors. And the interesting thing about it is that I'm always doing something different. Oh, I can step a little closer. I'm always doing something different. I love doing, that's one of the big issues that I had with my publishing company. After I did So Good, an African American love story, they wanted me to do more love stories. And I was like, no, I'm done with that. I did that. So I did All of Me a Voluptuous Tale, which dealt with weight and wellness and self-esteem, because that's what I wanted to do next. And then they said, okay, well, that was pretty good. So let's do some more of that. No, I don't want to do that anymore. So then I did spirituality. And so now with this book, which is really interesting, and some of you will find this helpful. This book includes short stories, essays, poetry, and accessible research. And I can't tell you how many rejections I got. Yeah. And a lot of the publishers admitted, we don't know what to do with that. It's not a book of poetry. It's not a book of short stories. It's not research. We can't do anything with that. We don't know what to do. And finally, the editor who published my Racialism in the Media book, which is my research book, of the research I've been doing for the last 25 years on African Americans in the media, she said, well, I'll try. I said, okay, that's all I ask. Try. And I'll help you, I'll help you push it. So anyway, we do have a publisher, Peter Lang. It'll be out at the end of the spring. And I wanted to say, I wanted to include one other thing. I got a blurb from Marita Golden, who's a very prominent African American author. And I was just, this floored me. Her blurb floored me. She said, the book you're holding is a whisper, a cry, a scream. The Black Superwoman and Mental Health, Power, and Pain is a brilliantly imagined, conceived, and produced manifesto. I was like, whoa. Okay. Anyway, I have 3 pieces in the book. One is a research piece, accessible research about Black women images on television and how what I wanted to explore was when Black women viewers see Black women on on television, like with therapists and dealing with mental health issues, does it influence them in any way to actually deal with their own mental health issues? Because some of you may know research has shown that in African American communities, mental health issues are really problematic. People don't want to admit it. They don't want to go to therapists, that kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to do with that. And then I did an essay it's called Black Female Pastors, Superwoman Meets God. And what I wanted to do was I interviewed a number of Black female pastors because I wanted to see, how does faith and God connect with this whole concept of trying to be superwoman? Is it helpful? Is it hurtful? I mean, what are some of the issues there? The piece I'm going to read tonight is a short piece. It's a short story that I wanted to read. It's fiction, and it deals with postpartum depression, and it's called Beautiful Baby Boy Blues. He was beautiful. Head perfectly round, covered in wisps of curly brown hair, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a smile that should have made Grace joyful. She watched him lay quietly in his crib and knew that what she was feeling was love. Yet instead of a motherly urge to pick him up and hold him close, she rushed into her own bedroom and shut the door. Jaden was born 3 weeks early, excited to see what was waiting for him out in the world. He didn't realize that he would be raised by a single mother whose mental stability would be in question for the first year of his life. When he cried, Grace cried too. When he slept, Grace tried to sleep as well. And when he was happy, Grace wanted to be happy. But her anxiety and depression made life unbearable. She brought Jaden home understanding that the tiny human would need her incessantly. Each day that passed confirmed for Grace that she didn't know what she was doing, how she was supposed to feed or bathe or keep him safe, when she was so sad on some days that she could barely get out of bed. This was not part of the blueprint for her life. Grace had planned for the dream: a husband, established career, loving family, and supportive community. She didn't plan to get pregnant without a husband with no real career in sight. She had used an IUD for protection, and although she read the paperwork that explained it was only 99% effective, she never imagined that she would become a member of the elite 1% club. After contemplating for almost 2 weeks, Grace told Keith, the baby's daddy, that she was pregnant. Not because she wanted anything from him, but because she thought he should know. Their relationship wasn't serious. They got together 3 or 4 times a year, and Grace didn't think Keith even wanted to be a father, and he confirmed it. So she shrugged and walked away. She didn't need him or want him in her life permanently anyway. Grace made a pretty good living as a grant writer. She was under contract with 3 different organizations, creating proposals for various funding opportunities. She'd also established a successful blog, which offered tips on grant writing and fundraising. Over the last year, her blog had even become a financial asset. As an introvert, Grace didn't have many friends. She actually didn't have anyone she considered a true friend. She was a loner because other people aggravated her. Since COVID, she was able to work from home, and it was easier because she didn't have to be distracted by people. Crowds were unbearable for Grace, so she rarely went out to clubs, parties, concerts, or any of those kinds of events. She remembered shivering when she heard about a Beyonce concert in Atlanta with more than 50,000 fans yelling, screaming, and dancing. She could not imagine herself in a space surrounded by that many people. Just going to the grocery store was an exercise in proper timing. She tried to get there just as they opened in order to deal with fewer people. And if she went to a movie, it was usually a matinee where she could sit in an area alone. And since COVID, a lot of times she was only one in the theater. A few times a year, Grace wanted, maybe needed to feel the impact of a man's flesh pressed against hers. That's when she would call Keith. Keith was the CEO of a nonprofit that she used to write grants for. They started their ritual several years ago, late one night after finishing a difficult grant proposal. He offered Grace a glass of wine and she accepted. Then they had a second. She didn't blame it on the wine, though. She wanted him. The smell of his cologne, the sound of his laughter, and the kindness of his heart called to her. And the lovemaking was wonderful. After the first time, things went back to normal. She honestly didn't expect them to officially date, get engaged, and marry. However, they did remain friends with benefits. During the first few weeks at home with Jaden, Grace realized that there was something wrong. Over the 9 months, she thought she had prepared herself for the challenge that was coming. But now that he was here, Grace had to admit that she was seriously exhausted and constantly irritable. She wasn't Superwoman, and she didn't want to be Superwoman, yet this little person had nobody but her. Adopted by an older couple who had both passed away by Grace's 20th birthday, she had to raise this child on her own. Jaden had started crying in his room. It had been almost 10 minutes, even though it seemed like much more. Grace stood up to go get him and then quickly sat back down. Some mothers leaped up as soon as the crying started, and others, like Grace, prayed that the child would cry themselves to sleep. She wondered, how long can you let a baby cry for it to be considered abuse? She finally decided to see what was going on and ambled toward the door to his room. The closer she got, the louder his crying became. Grace swallowed. She had read somewhere that mothers were supposed to know what was wrong when their babies cried. It was a certain type of crying, but she didn't have a clue. He was probably wet or hungry. Those were usually his main issues. She hesitated outside his door, then took a deep, fortifying breath before entering. She checked his diaper first. It was dry. So the next step was to warm a bottle. She couldn't breastfeed because of a breast reduction she had had almost 10 years previously. It was a period in her life where she still hoped to find a man who would make her life complete. No such luck. Picking Jaden up, Grace leaned his body against her chest and he stopped crying immediately. She closed her eyes and listened to his heart beating fast. Maybe that was all he needed, to be held. In the kitchen, she took a bottle out of the refrigerator and set it in the pot with water on the stove to warm it up. And minutes later, as he sucked the warm milk, Grace thought about all the single mothers, past and present, who had raised wonderful kids. She wanted to believe that none of them were smarter or stronger or better than she was. Grace concentrated on his tiny fingers gripping the edge of her blouse. Why was she so miserable? She was supposed to be happy. She was supposed to enjoy motherhood. Although she understood the medical elements that determine postpartum depression, why did she have to be burdened with these feelings? She felt so many of the symptoms: depression, anxiety, sadness, fatigue, mood swings, and especially a lack of concentration. Her doctor told her that this general sadness was normal for most women after birth, and he encouraged her to give it time to go away. But after a few weeks, when it didn't go away, he recommended that she see a therapist. Grace turned up her nose. She was not crazy. She didn't need a therapist. Specifically, she was not going to admit to anybody her failure to thrive with this new challenge. Staring down at Jaden, who lay comfortably in her arms, Grace knew she needed to somehow bond with him. But with her hormones spinning out of control, how could she? The emotions seemed to shift without warning, and she had no control. Grace didn't know how she was going to do it, but she knew she had to take care of Jaden because she had made him. She had brought him into this world, and he was dependent on her. He was such a beautiful baby, head perfectly round, covered in wisps of curly brown hair, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a smile that Grace prayed would someday make her happy. Thank you.
I'm here to introduce Professor Paul. He insists on being called that. I actually wrote this and it was so long and I had to like take out pages. This is really hard to write an introduction of someone whose work I respect so much and who's such a good friend. When asked to introduce a colleague, especially a friend, I first find myself considering the tone. Many of you already know that Iain has a great sense of humor. And I was trying to think of a good anecdote to begin this introduction. An anecdote that might most effectively illustrate his humor. However, to be honest, some of my best anecdotes about Iain are stories of incidents that occurred after hours over Manhattans. And I don't mean to suggest anything untoward at all, but let's just say that the honesty you're already acquainted with from Iain or about to become acquainted with is a little sharper edged at 1 a.m. in the morning after Manhattans. And I consider myself lucky to be able to witness such humor laid out like a delicacy for those brave souls willing to stay up past their bedtimes and risk their ability to facilitate morning workshop sessions. However, these are not stories to be told at the podium. If you've read Iain's work, you probably aren't surprised to hear that Iain makes sharp observations at 1 a.m. He has an eye for the telling detail. From To Know Its Taste, his poem, To Know Its Taste, he writes, "The oleander grew along a stucco wall. My mother said the flowers were beautiful, the leaves deadly. I should not eat them. But I'd never have thought to take the leaves onto my tongue without her warning." These details take us to a place so specific, we may walk down a street, turn a corner, and find it. It isn't a static place, though, preserved in amber or placed on a shelf where the dust might settle on it. Iain couples his precise descriptions with the coiled tensions we all live with day in and day out. They are the tensions that none of us can seem to quite unwind, the conflicts that have unspoken causes, or the spoken causes aren't their true causes. What does it mean, the urge to laugh at someone or something that's vulnerable, to throw rocks at an injured creature, To stare at a woman when maybe she doesn't want you to. These are the pages that I just wrote and wrote and wrote. I could go on and on about Iain's accolades. His collection, Ghosts Like a Place, published by Alice James Books, was nominated for an NAACP Image Award, and Spitback a Boy was a winner of the Cave Canem Poetry Prize. His poems have appeared in publications such as the African American Review, American Academy of Poets Poem a Day, American Poetry Review, the New York Times Magazine, PoetrySociety.org, and the Progressive. He is on the board of Tiger Bark Press. He teaches here at Solstice, and he currently directs the MFA program at Manhattanville College, where he edits the literary journal Inkwell. What is, however, to me more important is that Iain is a teacher. And what I mean by this is that he cares about the world, about the everyday, about the people around him, about language, how it sounds spoken from a podium, how it feels in our mouths as we speak it, how it looks on a page, how it shifts over time, what it says and what it fails to say. He turns his keen eye on this world, on himself, on all of us. He asks questions, and he nudges the rest of us to do the same. In this world where so many of us are staring not at the shadows displayed on Plato's wall, but instead at the screens that we know are distorting us and distorting the world in which we live, don't we need more teachers like Iain asking us to attend, to question, to try to write down the truths we're struggling to understand, and to speak these truths out loud? You can argue with me over Manhattans or a beverage of your choice at 1 a.m. in the morning if you must, and I'm ready to stand by my claim that we do need such teachers. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Pollock.
Oh, wow. I am blown away. I just told Laura that was much more than I deserved. That was wonderful. I like to go second because you get to lower the standard. So get ready for that. So I have a new book, a new collection of poems coming out in the fall. Thank you. I'm super excited about it, but I'm not going to read you any poems from it. I will read them next year, but one of the fun things about coming to an annual reading is that it's an opportunity to experiment. And for me as a professor in the program, to show the vulnerability and model the vulnerability that Meg talks about at the beginning, at the orientation. So I wanted to read like new poems that I've written beyond the book, and I'm super excited to do that. What I've been thinking about lately is about fear and how it's an animating force both in my own life, and I also view it to be an animating force in American public life. So that's sort of what is tying the poems together. I'll sort of start personally and move a little more publicly and then come back to the personal. There's 6 poems. You sometimes need to know the number of poems to get through a poetry reading so you can count them off in your head. And I return to the field. And I return to the field that I never leave. Other boys are here too, stamping the bruised dark grass. One of us stands alone between posts and waits for the rest to rifle a ball through the dark and toward the net he defends. Security lights from the school on the embankment above us cast angles and shadows that cut through our bodies and abstract them. All I have learned up till now is fear of opaque windows in houses outside the fence, of headlights to lone cars that pass, leaving a wake of deeper dark, of the neighbor night walking his brindled, snarl-jawed dog, of other boys laughing and taunting before their volleys bullet toward and beyond the boy guarding the net, of myself, how I understand no choice but to join them. Then I am called to stand between the posts, and what else can I do? When I am there, other boys strike the one ball shared between us, and it sidewinds out of the dark, hurtling above or around, or sometimes straight at me. And what else can I do? Crouched in my place and ready to throw my body after the ball as it rips out of the night, but raise my own laughter against them. The boys arrayed 20 yards away and aiming for my failure, but ring out with a taunting glee of my own. Until I call another boy to his turn and walk back to the edge of the group and wait to stand over the ball and hope to make the new boy lay down his body for our game as I have laid down mine. And at the end of it, what else can I do but return the shoves of other boys as we send each other away in a gesture we refuse to name as love, and slip through the fence gap where we first snuck in and leave the field I can never leave, and all my fear intact be gone. For a clap between every poem community, thank you. I know it's pandering to the crowd, but it really is lonely when you read something and then there's like the stunned high church silence. I think one of the things I fear most is the people I love the most dying. And this poem is about that. It's also an ekphrastic poem, but I don't think you need to have seen the David Hammond's piece that it's based on. It's an assemblage of objects, many of which are listed in the poem. But David Hammond is a great artist, and you should check out his work. To assemble a ritual of praise around them. I have a bad habit of mourning the dead before they're gone. In both days of snow and of bloom, I visit my mother, but I lost her years ago. In my grief, she becomes objects, fluted perfume bottles, bullets of lipstick, grandfather clock with stalled pendulum, stacked books of theories and incantations offering protection against her annihilation, as if palisades to a small city overlooking the coastal plain. Brass chains dangling geometric pendants and hung between wearings on the corner of her bedroom mirror. Skillets, cast iron and Teflon bearing their grease and char. Loud engines of too fast cars she drove. She drives. She is not far from me. Days of snow, days of bloom. Why do I build mausoleums around the breathing? Why do I leave them enshrined in this damp, close air? They are still warm to the touch. Perhaps to elegize the living is to assemble a ritual of praise around them. I think this on my better days, but you know, most days are not my better days. Most days with rubber tubing, I strap to my body the objects I've made of the dead who are not, and haul this weight wherever I go. I could cross over the ridges bluing in the distance and see them, the above ground dead, hear the hum and beat of them, inhale their scent. I could cross over, but I fall back into habit. The living, the breathing, I mourn them before they are gone. So thinking more publicly, I think that fear becomes like this intense desire for safety, right? And I think in turn, I think that desire for safety becomes an intense desire to own a gun. And I think in my other collections and Ghost Like a Place, I kind of deal with gun violence in a more maybe spectacular way, or kind of reacting to very public things. This was a more mundane example, I think. Americana. The boy sits alone in the back seat of a car in a parking lot to a grocery store on a hot day with the window down and holds a toy, a plastic toy with linked blocks, a plastic toy decorated with green triangles and squares, a plastic toy that many children imagine as a snake, a plastic toy the boy imagines as a gun, a long-barreled pistol, and points it at me through the open window while I walk into the grocery store, squints down the barrel and traces my path into the grocery store, and puffs his cheeks before pushing out the air, the exhale of the gunshot, and raises the barrel, the mock recoil he cannot handle, and does it again. Point, squint, puff, push out, raise. As his father comes to the car, carrying a package of ground beef and a long box of soda cans, and puts them on the roof before he opens the rear door and slides them onto the seat next to the boy, and laughs at his son, raising the barrel for a third time, and does not tell him to stop, and starts the engine and backs out of the spot and drives out of the parking lot with his son now pointing through the back glass and squinting again down the barrel with his son's cheeks waiting to fill with a fourth explosion of air, with his son training on me a plastic toy that might have been a snake, but he imagined as a gun, while I walk on a sweltering day through a pattern of parked cars into a grocery store. I find sometimes in myself, and I perceive this in others, that sometimes all the small fears we feel overwhelm us, become so much that we turn away. And in turning away, we end up turning away from some things that I think we should legitimately be afraid of, that are the things that should probably scare us most. All the woods we walk were owned. All the woods we walk were owned by men living behind hedgerows, men who prized columns and colorless statuary and bloodlines above the very air they breathed. All the woods, second growth, the trees unrelated to the hardwood these men paid us to clear cut from the slopes. In death, they willed their logging roads and new forests to us in penance for scarring our bodies and the land. We tricked ourselves into believing we could be healed here, walking through filtered light and birdsong in all seasons. At first, we saw the burning human forms once a year, and we were glad they were not us. Then, every month, a form made in our image burned beneath hemlocks and tulip poplars, and we were glad they were not us. These days, a burning every hour a form in the shape of us becomes ash, white-gray, windswept into the undergrowth. And we are glad they are not us, even as their smoke gathers in our lungs, becomes a reflex, an expansion and contraction, intake and exhaust of our every living breath. unknown landscape with silt and fog. This known place, now unknown, midwinter but warm, the river low, river that ripples in summer like the silver-scaled snake told in myth, myth that died with its teller. The road runs mirror to the river, but nearer the hills, and here, over geologic time, river spill of silt has covered the base of one hill, valley floor slowly climbing back upward, so that the road, built on the dirt flat, winds close now under the imposing slope, scattered with birch trunks growing impossibly on the rock face. This, a small site to mark any journey, east going out or west into home, when I still counted here, home. Midwinter, but warm, warmer than the days before, warmer in the air than on the ground. Fog around the slope face, hanging like my father's hair, gone wild long and stark white. While inside the fog, the whiteness of the birch becomes a specter within a specter. All as if I've never seen it, until the fog makes clear. What once counted as home, the hill, the river, my father, I have never known them, could never have known them. I have not even known and cannot ever know myself. All right, this is number 6, if you've been counting. Thank you to Meg and Quentin for this community and for this space and for having me back every year. I've started sending, my kids go to sleepaway camp and they are always wanting to hang out with their camp friends, and coming here every year feels like I get to hang out with my camp friends. Thanks to my colleagues. It's wonderful to be in this space and have colleagues who are also such dedicated teachers and whose work I so admire. And yeah, apparently we have fun after hours. And thank you to the students who are just wonderful and are here to do the work, and not to play artist and not to pretend to do it, but who actually want to do the hard work of writing and sort of excavating their lives and their experiences and putting it out there in an artistic form for the world to see. And thank you to old friends for showing up whenever I ask them to come to readings. I appreciate it. So this last poem is about Assateague Island, which is a barrier island off the coast of Maryland. It's famed for its large population of wild horses. So people go there to camp and be with the horses. Don't believe the hype. It's a mosquito-ridden hellscape. As you can tell, I had a disastrous vacation. The kids were at camp. Naomi and I are going to take a vacation together. Didn't work out. Wrote a poem about it. Assateague Island. We weren't supposed to come near the wild horses, but what if the horses came near us? Experience told them the smoke of humans kept at bay the mosquitoes and biting flies that swarmed their hides. They stuck their muzzles inches from the flames. When we beat pots against pots to reclaim our fire, a colt, as it spooked, tangled in a guy line, snapping a pole and causing a collapse. Argument led to argument until we waved the white flag, abandoned the tent, retreated to the safety and high-watt kitsch of Ocean City. Sometimes surrender is a form of triumph. Up the coast, between fenced dunes and a brooding sea, we sat thigh to thigh on a beach towel, catching the sun skim up over the horizon. Not since our first months together had we done this, and then, too, an accident. The last train out of Manhattan missed. Over burnt coffee, we watched while the door glass of an all-night diner eased from reflective dark to blushed with light. On our way out of Maryland, I didn't take from our hotel closet a favorite shirt, blanket weave meant for night beaches, colder air. We shouldn't go back, she said, when I realized what I'd left. I was angry again for a few miles, but she was right. Sometimes, even if you could fight to find it, you concede what you've lost. Let it drift off to the south. To save yourself from yourself, sometimes you let what you've lost stay crumpled in the sand where it's fallen, or hanging in the strange closet where you hung it. Sometimes what you've lost, you let it stay safely lost. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, I think it's maybe okay.
I don't need it.
A little bit lower. All right. Okay. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jen Murvin. She comes to us from Missouri State University, where she is an assistant professor of English, and she teaches classes in English, creative writing, graphic narrative. Although I suspect part of her heart is still over in Southern California, where she's from. In Springfield, Jen is also owner of Pagination Bookshop, an indie bookstore. She is a faculty leader for the nonprofit organization River Pretty Writers Retreat. Try to say that a lot. And of course, she joined Solstice here as a full-time faculty member a year ago. And if that's not enough, because, she always has to keep busy. This past semester, she also took on an administrative position as an assistant chair back at her department in Missouri State. She is the author of 3 collections of stories, including She Says, which she read part of her collection last time she was with us. And this was published this past semester. Her essays, stories, graphic narratives have appeared in a number of journals, including Hayden's Ferry Review, River Styx, and the Southampton Review. She's been the winner of several different awards, including the American Short Fiction Contest. And I've taken some of Jen's classes here in residency. I've audited some on graphic narrative, totally introduced me to a whole new weird world. Workshopped with her, and this past semester I worked with her on my critical essay. If you haven't heard yet, she's loved by all of her students. She's a great teacher. She has a special ability to connect with people. She makes everyone feel wanted and valued. She can critically analyze your work without it feeling critical. And she knows how to push students to become better writers. And so I have a big bad idea. Why don't you all join me in giving Jen a big warm solstice welcome?
Thank you all so much, Beth. Thank you. This community, it just blows my mind every time I come. I just cannot wait until we get to residency. I love it here. The people here are the best people. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Meg and Quentin and Cassie and Ellen and Venise and Iain. The standard is gone. There's no standard. That's an abstraction. I'm going to read 2 pieces. The first being this graphic essay this is not the title. It's not titled Need the Title Help. That is my call. If you have any brilliant ideas, I would love it. This is a brand new comic that is not quite finished because it doesn't have a title or a title panel yet. I've been working on it for a while. I read a little, oh, that's perfect. Yes, thank you. That'll be great. Feel free to just turn that down. Yeah, that's perfect. I read the prose piece of this for the Solstice scholarship reading fundraiser event. And I made a promise to all the people that were at that event that I would make it into a comic by residency. And it's so good to make yourself give that promise, because then I had to fulfill it. So it's almost there. So this is untitled, and I'm just gonna go for it. Can everyone see that okay? Great.
Yeah.
The afternoon, I receive a call from the dermatologist telling me I have melanoma. I am preparing for the eclipse, which in my town will reach 97% totality. And then I'm just showing each kind of whole page after I read the panels. In an eclipse, animal phenomena includes nighttime behaviors, returning to nest, to roost, ceasing bird song. In one study, a group of flamingos huddled together for the short time of shadow, afterward dispersing as usual. And I think of the way a peony bloom sometimes falls apart, exploding pink across my desk. A flamingo produces a special kind of serum they spread on their pink feathers to prevent bleaching, to keep their color vibrant, to attract a mate. Melanoma can be caused by sun exposure, genetics, immune disorders. Often people will miss melanomas on the bottoms of their feet. Check your feet. When I tell friends of my diagnosis, they tell me of family, friends who are dead now. I had noticed the odd freckle on my thigh in spring when bringing my legs from winter hibernation. The freckle darker than I remembered and tingling. Its shape not unlike a misdrawn moon. Gaseous eruptions on the sun, called prominences, are always there, but only visible to the naked eye during an eclipse. In photographs, prominences look like clouds of smoke exhaled by an artful and experienced cigar lover. When they ask me of my risk factors, I am not a smoker. I have dark hair and eyes. I tan easily. I'm from California, land of sunshine. When I call my sister, she doesn't know there is an eclipse, does not plan to look up. Oh, sorry, I already read that. I take the sun for granted, enjoying, let's see, I can't even read. I'm sort of blocking myself here with this. Hold on. Technology. Enjoying its gifts, ignoring its power. In the skin of my thigh, something dangerous has been at work. When the doctors say they have taken it all, I think of the important difference between 97% and 100% totality. How, when I went outside to experience the eclipse, I had forgotten the special glasses and had to look at the shadows instead. When they cut into me, cut it out of me, they left in its place a long scar, pink like April's moon, a brief season of wonders. So many freckles in my sky, but are they moons or asteroids? I am my body's astronomer, tilting my instrument for the best view of my own annihilation. Oh, and that's the end. Thank you. Okay, phew, technology portion is over. Okay, I'm gonna just read a very, very short series of vignettes from my forthcoming collection, Real California Living, that's coming out in the summer. And in this collection, I have little vignettes. I kind of titled them all Real California Living with some subtitles that are just in between all my stories that are basically just little essays about growing up in Southern California. So I just put a few of them together to read tonight. keeping in my heart all the people in LA right now. It's just very scary. So I thought I would just read these in honor of that. Real California Living, Simi Valley, California, 93065. Home to Charles Manson's caves, the Ronald Reagan Library, the Santa Susana nuclear disaster, the Rodney King trials, Grandma's apricot tree, Grandma, buried under the pink rose, visit when you come home. Don't forget to say a prayer to the Jehovah you don't believe in, but hope is this for her sake. Pick a lemon from the tree hanging over the neighbor's wall. A pomegranate popped up this year. Its fruit like Christmas ornaments in summer. Grapefruit can negatively interact with medication. Apricots make for good jam. In the evenings, watch the crows cover the cul-de-sac like flies. They fly away and come back. Is the rumbling an earthquake or Rocketdyne? Watch the hills. June gloom is a state of the weather, not of the mind. Live with your ears open, breathe before the smoke comes. Carry home a strip of eucalyptus bark. Squeeze the aloe's pulp from its thick skin for its healing properties. It is beautiful here, isn't it? You can't deny it, it really is. Real California Living, warnings. Small pets left outside may be eaten by coyotes, who may be eaten by mountain lions, who may be shot by the neighbor. Excessive sun tanning may cause daydreams, may cause sweat to slick between the thighs, may cause hallucinations of morphing into citrus fruits. Skin cancer, water usage outside of specified restrictions may result in a fine, jailing, reports to the HOA, whispers among the neighbors. Did you see their sprinklers were on Saturday and Sunday? Eucalyptus branches may fall in heavy winds, may squish small animals and children into the ground where they will regrow into new eucalyptus trees to be harvested into bundles sold for $15 to be used in the shower for relaxation. Rains may beget mudslides and the canyons burned bare by fire, waves of mud, oceans of mud. Beware of rattlesnakes, great whites, smog alerts, wildfires, red ants, grizzly bears, roof rats, riptides, sunny skies, rainy skies. Beware, children. Don't ride bikes in the Santa Susana Pass. If you do, don't fall off your bike. If you do, don't let the dirt touch your open mouth. Real California Living. Your mom said, this is where Bob Barker lives. She says, this neighborhood doesn't look anything like it used to. How can they fit these giant houses on these small lots? She says, I used to play here. I used to walk the poodles. She says, what a shame. Go have milkshakes at the Big Boy. Directions. Take the 118 to the 23. Admire the hills. There is snow on the mountains. Traffic looks good. Don't talk about it. Take the 101 through Thousand Oaks, Newbury Park, down the grade to Camarillo. The car stinks like onions, cabbage. What's planted out there? Roll up the windows. An Amazon warehouse like a nightmare in the field. Workers bend to vegetables, fruits planted in rows straight enough to make you dizzy. Blood or strawberries. Take the 33 to Ojai. In the distance, thirsty pump jacks dip and pull like birds. Watch for smoke. Real California Living. Nana was an actress. She has an IMDb page even. She loved to act, they said. Who? Did she remember her lines in those last days in the nursing home? They, who, say these things can come back with dementia, things from childhood. Mom has a little cardboard version of Nana, someone printed like a paper doll you can set in a stand from one of her movie roles. Grandpa didn't want her to act after she got married. What was her favorite movie? Did she imagine herself another life as a movie star in sequins dresses like Grandpa's favorite cut crystal? Aunt Peggy was one of the ballerinas in White Christmas. Look for her in the red tutu. Still alive, the only one left for now. She has her sister's eyes, but who is left to remember that? She is, for now, old Hollywood. Uncle Sam drew for Disney. These things all say California, real California, the one from the movies, right? The one where everyone is famous or almost famous or was famous once. The golden age like sun reflecting on the sand. A brief but magical time of day, a time to take a picture maybe for nostalgia. Real California Living. Use railroad ties to set off the garden. Water every day until the earth is drained. Grow the fruit. Trees, eat the fruit. Apricots taste like summer. Lemons go with everything. Admire the ponderosas. The rinds can be used in soaps. Grandma calls the worms protein when you cry about them in your apples. Real California Living. In Malibu, Cher is shopping in the cosmetics aisle at Save-On. She is thin as a branch. Her hair catches the light, used to this. She has a basket slung into her elbow. She is wearing tennis shoes. She is unmistakably Cher, tiny like a human doll. Run away without the toothpaste you'd come for. Tell everyone. Real California living. Keep cash ready for the Oxnard strawberry trucks. $11 a flat. Wash and wash before eating. Are you within 2 miles of the Santa Susana Field Lab? Do not wash with tap water. Do not drink the tap water. Move far away. Never have lived there in the first place. Dry leaves of the palms rattle like a rain stick. There are no rains until there are too many. The mountains cannot be trusted. Tomorrow, you will gather the grapefruit to juice, make cake. If you have to pull the lemons, they are not ripe enough. Tangerines gather on their branches like nervous girls at a party. Toss the rinds into the horse trail. Apricots with their sweet fuzz, grandma's favorite for jam, for oatmeal bars. Check the dates on the cheese in the freezer. A tiny hard apple can be eaten or thrown. Careful, it will poke your eye out. Careful, a drought is coming. Careful, the mountain is also a river. The fire is also a chemical. Grandma is also the wind, is also the lemons. Pick them all. Ready or not, here you come. Thank you.
You may have to see it here, doesn't matter. All right. That was awesome. What a great way to start our reading series here, at winter residency. Thank you, Jen Murvin, Iain Haley Pollock, and Venise Berry. Can we have one more round of applause for our reading?